Medieval texting. To all those who have ever sent a text message, especially those who have accidentally unleashed a torrent of autocorrect-induced mayhem upon unsuspecting recipients, may your missives be as hilariously misinterpreted as those within these pages. This book is dedicated to the glorious chaos of unintended consequences, the delightful absurdity of technological malfunctions, and the enduring human capacity for finding humor in even the most disastrous of circumstances. For without the perfectly timed typo, the disastrous autocorrect, and the utterly baffling emoji, life, and indeed medieval life, would be far less entertaining. Let us raise a goblet, or perhaps a slightly chipped smartphone, to the glorious imperfections of communication, both ancient and modern, to the knights who meant to summon reinforcements, but instead invited their enemies to a picnic, to the queens whose passionate declarations of love became mangled pronouncements of war, to the peasants whose complaints about gruel became viral sensations, to the scribes who struggled with the quill, and the thumbs who grapple with the tiny keyboard, to the valiant souls who dared to text in the shadow of towering castles and the ever-present threat of dragon attacks, or at least the threat of a slightly burnt roast. This book is a testament to the enduring spirit of humanity, a species capable of mastering the art of war, the craft of poetry, and the frustrating intricacies of mobile technology, all in the same lifetime. So here's to the brave, the bold, the bewildered, the technologically inept, and to all those who have found a way to laugh in the face of utter linguistic calamity. May your texts always be received and misinterpreted with gusto. May your emojis always convey precisely what you intend, or perhaps the complete opposite, for that's where the real humor lies. And may this book bring a smile to your face, a chuckle to your lips, and perhaps even a slight groan of recognition as you recall your own text-related misadventures. For truly, we are all knights errant in the digital age, battling not dragons, but the ever-shifting sands of autocorrect. Onward, my friends. May your thumbs be swift, and your messages, well, let's just hope they are clear. But mostly, may they be hilariously unclear. Chapter 1. The Texting Knight. Sir Reginald Strongforth, the bravest knight in the realm, or so he believed, stared at the sleek, obsidian rectangle in his calloused hand. It was, according to the rather flustered young monk who delivered it, a mobile phone. A what now? Reginald, whose technological expertise extended to the effective use of a catapult, was utterly baffled. The monk, bless his cotton socks, had mumbled something about texting and emojis, words that sounded suspiciously like a new form of witchcraft. The phone, a surprisingly sturdy model considering its delicate appearance, sat in his palm, a stark contrast to the worn leather of his gauntlet. He'd received it as a gift from the rather eccentric Duke Bartholomew, apparently a devotee of this newfangled communication device. Bartholomew had claimed it would revolutionize warfare. Reginald, however, suspected it would revolutionize the amount of time he spent scratching his head in bewilderment. His first task, as per the Duke's rather insistent instructions, delivered via a series of increasingly frantic hand gestures, was to send a text message to his squire, young Thomas, a simple, straightforward message, Meeting at the training grounds in 1 hour. Simple enough, right? Wrong. Reginald, after much huffing and puffing, managed to locate the message icon. He tapped it. The screen, a dizzying array of glowing symbols, seemed to mock his ignorance. He pecked at the letters, his large fingers struggling with the tiny keyboard. He managed to get meat before the phone's autocorrect. A mischievous gremlin within the machine decided to rearrange his efforts. The word transformed into meeting. Mused Reginald, unconcerned. A minor typo, he continued, painstakingly composing the rest of the message. At the training ground in 1 hour. The autocorrect, however, had other ideas. This time, his message morphed into at the training ground in 1 hour with dragons. Reginald, never one to second-guess technology, hit send. He sheathed the phone, feeling a pang of satisfaction. He'd mastered modern communication, or so he thought. Within minutes, a ripple of panic spread through the town. Word, spread with the speed of wildfire, fueled by terrified whispers and exaggerated gestures, had reached the ears of the townsfolk that a monstrous dragon, described by one particularly imaginative baker as having scales the color of a particularly ripe plum and breath that smelled alarmingly of burnt gingerbread, was sighted heading directly for the training grounds. Chaos reigned. Women shrieked. Children cried. Men, normally brave and stoic, fled in terror, abandoning their ale mid-sip. The normally bustling marketplace became a scene of frantic pandemonium. Knights, including Reginald himself, who had been patiently waiting for his squire to appear, were caught off guard by the wave of pure, unadulterated terror. Reginald, perplexed, watched the mayhem unfold. The dragon, of course, never showed. It turned out that the baker's vivid descriptions of the beast were a result of a particularly strong batch of home-brewed mead. However, the rumor continued to spread, fueled by nervous laughter and a healthy dose of speculation. Thomas, meanwhile, had received the dragon message, which his own interpretation, heavily influenced by a recent spate of incredibly unrealistic fairy tales, had transformed into a prophecy of fire and doom. Thomas, being quite the imaginative one, had responded with his own text. Bring extra chainmail and maybe some sausages. This second text message, intercepted by a particularly excitable stable boy who had the unfortunate luck of picking up Thomas's message mistakenly, caused even more panic. This prompted an increase in the already excessive amount of hysteria. The townsfolk now prepared not only for a dragon, but for a dragon with a taste for sausages. Later that day, after a near riot was quelled, largely thanks to Reginald's booming voice and surprisingly effective use of a large, rather dusty fish to distract the panicked crowd, the knight finally managed to reach Thomas by shouting across the town square. Thomas, a little pale, explained that the dragon was a mere misunderstanding. Reginald, deeply embarrassed, confessed his misadventures with the new technology. The entire episode proved that while Sir Reginald was indeed brave and skilled with his sword, he clearly lacked the ability or the inclination to master the mysteries of modern communication. The experience, however, was certainly memorable, and as far as Reginald knew, his dragon text became the subject of numerous tales in the local tavern, making him the town's unwitting comedic relief for years to come. The tale of Sir Reginald and the text that wasn't quite what it seemed added an extra layer of spice to his already legendary status. It was a tale passed down through generations of townsfolk, a testament to the absurdity of progress and the perils of autocorrect. And let's not forget the unexpected culinary interests of a mythical dragon. Reginald, still smarting from the dragon incident, decided to tackle his next technological challenge with a more refined approach. This time, his target was Lady Beatrice, a woman whose beauty was only surpassed by her apparent disdain for his rather clumsy attempts at courtship. He'd heard whispers, carried on the wind, much like the rumors of the gingerbread-scented dragon, that she possessed a mobile phone, a device he now understood to be more dangerous than any dragon if wielded improperly. He found her in the dimly lit corner of the Crooked Tankard, a tavern renowned for its potent ale and even more potent gossip. The air hung thick with the smell of roasted meat, spilled ale, and Lady Beatrice's exquisite perfume, a fragrance Reginald secretly compared to the finest mead. She was surrounded by a gaggle of giggling ladies-in-waiting, their laughter echoing off the rough-hewn stone walls. He cleared his throat, the sound surprisingly loud in the boisterous tavern. Taking a deep breath, he retrieved his phone, a device that now seemed to pulse with a malevolent intelligence, and painstakingly began to compose his message. He wanted to invite her to the upcoming jousting tournament, an event he hoped would showcase his superior fighting skills and possibly, just possibly, impress Lady Beatrice. His initial attempt: Lady Beatrice, honor me with your presence at the joust. Your beauty will outshine all the other ladies, resulted in a rather alarming rendition. Lady Beartrace, honor me with your presence at the just. Your beauty will outshine all the other ladies. The autocorrect, it seemed, had a particular vendetta against his attempts at romance. Reginald frowned. Presents? He muttered, scratching his head. He deleted the message and started again. This time, he opted for a more straightforward approach. Jousting tournament. Tomorrow. Be there. Simple, effective, and devoid of flowery language that the autocorrect could potentially mangle. Except, of course, the autocorrect had other plans. His message arrived as jousting tournament. Tomorrow. Be there. Reginald sighed. He felt like he was battling a far more formidable opponent than any knight in the land. This technology was truly a beast. Lady Beatrice, meanwhile, received the garbled message. Her eyebrows arched in confusion. A jousting tournament? She murmured, her voice tinged with amusement. Tomorrow? And what is this be there business? Is it some sort of coded message from a secret admirer? Her ladies-in-waiting giggled, speculating wildly about the identity of the mysterious texter. The next day, at the tournament, the atmosphere was electric. Knights clashed, horses thundered, and the crowd roared its approval. Reginald, ever the showman, performed breathtaking feats of horsemanship and swordplay, all the while casting furtive glances towards Lady Beatrice. He had hoped that his demonstration of chivalrous prowess might clarify his clumsy invitation. However, Lady Beatrice was nowhere to be seen. Instead, a rather attractive blacksmith's daughter, Ilara, approached him, her face flushed. She clutched a slightly crumpled piece of parchment, a hastily scribbled note, in her hand. Sir Reginald, she said, her voice trembling slightly. I received your message. I understood it to be an invitation to a jousting tournament, which I took to mean a clandestine meeting, tomorrow, in a dark alleyway behind the blacksmith's forge. I understood that the be there was a subtle hint to only bring my hammer and not the tongs. I did not think you'd expect me to wear such gaudy clothes. Reginald stared at her, dumbfounded. A clandestine meeting? In a dark alleyway? With only a hammer? The autocorrect, he realized, had not only misconstrued his words, but had somehow managed to transform them into a rather scandalous proposition. Ilara, it seemed, was equally confused by this interpretation. Ilara, being a practical woman and a skilled blacksmith, had taken the invitation literally. She had interpreted jousting as some obscure blacksmithing term involving hammers. She had assumed tomorrow meant the next day, and the be there instruction as code for her to prepare her tools. The idea of a secret rendezvous had only slightly confused her. The clothes part, though, she'd added herself. Meanwhile, Lady Beatrice, having received a series of increasingly bizarre text messages from various suitors, each vying for her attention with equally mangled attempts at romance, had retreated to her chambers, convinced the kingdom had collectively gone mad. The misinterpretations added to the chaotic atmosphere, creating a rather absurd, laugh-out-loud misunderstanding. The rest of the tournament was a blur of confusion and increasingly hilarious misunderstandings. Reginald, desperately trying to clarify his intentions with both Ilara and Lady Beatrice, who had eventually learned of the mishap, found himself caught in a comedic whirlwind of his own making. The situation, however, was not entirely unwelcome. Ilara possessed a quick wit and a kind heart, and their shared amusement at the events, which eventually included Lady Beatrice joining in, paved the way for an unlikely friendship and something even more unexpected, a surprisingly successful romantic pursuit with Ilara. The whole episode proved to be a cautionary tale, not just about the perils of autocorrect, but also about the unexpected and comical twists that life and faulty mobile phones could throw one's way. And though Sir Reginald didn't win the jousting tournament, he did win something far more valuable, a new appreciation for the complexities of communication and a charming blacksmith for a companion. The tale of Reginald and the misconstrued text became a legend in the town, further solidifying his status as both a brave knight and a comedic genius, albeit entirely unintentionally. And it all started with a simple invitation to a jousting tournament, or rather, what was supposed to be a simple invitation. Sir Reginald, still reeling from the blacksmithing debacle, found himself facing a far graver challenge. News had reached him via a surprisingly reliable carrier pigeon, technology apparently having its limits, of an approaching enemy army. The Baron of Blackrock, a man whose mustache alone could intimidate a dragon, was poised to invade. Reginald, entrusted with the defense of the eastern border, knew he had to act swiftly. He grabbed his phone, the now infamous device responsible for so much comedic chaos, and began composing a message to his allies, Sir Gareth and Sir Barnaby. His initial attempt was straightforward. Enemy approaching. Prepare for battle. Reinforcements needed urgently. This time, He triple-checked for autocorrect errors, his fingers hovering nervously over the send button. He even resisted the urge to add a jaunty emoji. It seemed sensible enough. However, destiny, in the form of a particularly mischievous gremlin residing within the phone's software, had other plans. The message, upon transmission, was radically transformed. It arrived in the inboxes of Sirs Gareth and Barnaby as enemy approaching. Prepare for a feast. Reinforcements needed urgently. Pig emoji, cake emoji, wine glass emoji. The addition of emojis, completely unbidden, added into the absurdity. The word feast instead of battle was particularly alarming. Sir Gareth, a man whose culinary skills exceeded his strategic acumen, immediately interpreted the message as an invitation to a grand banquet. He envisioned a celebratory feast, complete with roasted boar, flagons of ale, and the finest mead. The pig emoji reinforced his conviction. He promptly dispatched his men, not to prepare for battle, but to gather the ingredients for a lavish feast. He even ordered a special delivery of extra-large gingerbread dragons. The text's tone seemed festive. Sir Barnaby, a man known for his literal interpretations, was equally misled. The urgency of reinforcements needed urgently, in conjunction with the emojis, led him to believe that the king was hosting a surprise birthday party for the queen, and that a substantial amount of celebratory paraphernalia must be assembled. He, too, mobilized his troops, not for battle, but for the task of gathering decorations, balloons, not available until the 18th century, thus requiring extra effort, and an appropriately sized cake. His understanding of the situation was based solely on the need to rapidly bring reinforcements, which he considered celebratory tools and people for a festivity. When the two armies finally arrived at the designated meeting point, the scene was far from the expected clash of steel. Instead, it was a chaotic picnic of epic proportions. The battlefield, instead of being strewn with fallen knights and shattered lances, was littered with half-eaten pies, discarded chicken bones, and empty flagons. Sir Gareth's men were busy roasting a giant boar, while Sir Barnaby's troops struggled to erect a rather flimsy banner that proclaimed "Happy Birthday, Your Majesty," despite not actually being the Queen's birthday. Reginald arrived initially horrified, then consumed by helpless laughter. His attempt to warn his allies had resulted in an unintentionally hilarious feast, a farcical banquet of peace instead of a bloody battle. The sight of two armies, fully equipped for war, indulging in a merry picnic, was almost too much to bear. Sir Gareth was happily carving the boar, while Sir Barnaby was attempting to light a rather precarious stack of fireworks. Baron Blackrock's army arrived just as the festivities were reaching their peak. They were met not with a ferocious defense, but with a bewildered Sir Reginald and two armies completely unprepared for war. The Baron, a man accustomed to intimidation and conquest, was taken completely aback. He stared, mouth agape, at the surreal scene of feasting and celebration before him. In the end, the unexpected picnic proved more effective than any battle. The utter absurdity of the situation diffused the tension, and rather than a conflict, an unlikely truce was called. The armies joined forces, sharing their food and celebrating the accidental feast that had averted a war. Baron Blackrock, charmed by the absurdity of the situation, joined in the celebrations, even taking part in a rather clumsy attempt at fireworks with Sir Barnaby. The incident quickly became legend. Reginald's accidental declaration of a feast rather than war solidified his reputation as a somewhat eccentric yet remarkably effective commander. His text messages, a source of endless amusement and some strategic failures, became a testament to the unpredictable nature of technology and the enduring power of humor. The tale of the text message that caused an unexpected feast instead of war was passed down through generations, a testament to Reginald's unique way of leading and avoiding combat through sheer, unintentional comedy. And the gingerbread dragons? They became a treasured part of the annual ceasefire celebration, a delicious reminder of a war averted by a simple, albeit disastrous, text message. Reginald, his reputation somewhat enhanced and considerably more whimsical after the great picnic truce, found himself facing a new challenge, one far more delicate than repelling invading armies. He was in love, head over heels, hopelessly, utterly smitten with Lady Beatrice, a woman whose laughter could charm the birds from the trees and whose smile could melt glaciers, if glaciers existed in this era. The problem? Confessing his feelings. He was a knight, after all, not a bard, and direct declarations of affection felt vulnerable. Enter the solution: texting, his instrument of both war averted and comedic genius. He needed the perfect emoji, not just any emoji, mind you. This wasn't a matter of casually adding a smiley face to a battle cry. This required a level of emotive precision previously unknown in the annals of emoji history. His quest began not on a battlefield, but in the vibrant heart of the enchanted forest bordering his lands. The forest itself seemed to mock his predicament. Sunlight dappled through the leaves, creating a playful atmosphere entirely unsuitable for the serious business of romantic communication. Squirrels chattered, possibly gossiping about his emotional turmoil, and birds sang what he interpreted as rather sarcastic melodies. He began his search. First, he considered the heart emoji. Too cliché, too predictable. Reginald envisioned Lady Beatrice rolling her eyes, a reaction he was determined to avoid. Then the flower emoji. Lovely, but perhaps insufficient to convey the depth of his feelings. What about a rose emoji? Too common. A wilting flower emoji? Too pessimistic. He needed something uniquely Reginald, something that encapsulated his specific brand of awkwardly charming chivalry. His search led him to a clearing where a group of mischievous pixies were engaged in a lively game of emoji toss. He approached cautiously, his intentions far from playful. "Excuse me, good pixies," he began, clearing his throat. "I'm on a rather urgent quest. I require the perfect emoji to express my undying love." The pixies, surprisingly understanding, ceased their game and gathered around him. Their leader, a particularly sassy pixie named Pip, examined him critically. "Undying love, you say? That's quite a challenge, even for us." She produced a small, glittering box from her sleeve. "We have something that might help," she said, revealing a trove of unconventional emojis. Pip produced a selection never seen before. There was a knight falling head over heels for a flower, a castle with a heart-shaped window, and most intriguingly, a dragon emitting a stream of tiny, exquisitely detailed hearts. Reginald was instantly enamored. It was perfect. It combined the symbolism of chivalry, romance, and a touch of his usual, well, unexpected flair. Yet another problem arose. The Pixie's insistence on payment, a basket of exceptionally rare and hard to find blackberries. His search for blackberries turned into another comical adventure. The blackberry bushes, guarded by fiercely territorial badgers, armed with miniature catapults naturally, proved far more formidable than any dragon he had ever encountered. One badger, a particularly grumpy one with a monocle perched atop his nose, challenged him to a riddle contest. Reginald, always quick with a pun but not so much with riddles, struggled. After a series of hilariously failed attempts at solving the badger's riddles, it came to be known that the badgers loved riddles, so Reginald ended up spending several hours crafting the most hilariously awful riddles. The badgers thought the riddles were terribly funny and doubled over with laughter. They were so amused by Reginald's attempts that they agreed to let him have the blackberries in exchange for the amusement. He even secured a signed agreement that ensured the delivery of the blackberries, which involved a rather unusual handshake and a series of rather complicated hand signals which the badgers invented on the spot. Finally, triumphant but covered in mud and scratches, Reginald returned to the Pixies, presenting his basket of hard-won blackberries. Pip, clearly impressed by his tenacity, awarded him the dragon emoji. He then prepared the message. He typed, "Dearest Beatrice, my heart, like a fiery dragon, breathes forth a torrent of love. Dragon heart emoji, only for thee." He sent the message, his heart pounding like a war drum. His phone, never one to miss an opportunity for a little chaos, transformed the message to, "Dearest Beatrice, my heart, like a fluffy kitten, purrs softly for thee. Kitten emoji, meow." Reginald face-palmed. Despite securing the perfect emoji, his phone still had a tendency to insert its own interpretations of reality. The kitten emoji, it was not at all what he wanted. He pondered his options. Perhaps a handwritten letter would be more effective, less likely to be affected by technological gremlins. He sighed. The quest for the perfect emoji had only just begun. It seemed even love had its technical difficulties. The battle, it seemed, was far from over. The pursuit of romance, even in a world of texting knights, was clearly more challenging than he'd anticipated. His quest for the perfect emoji to declare his undying love had led him down a path of mischievous pixies, grumpy badgers, and of course, his perpetually mischievous mobile device. The journey itself, though, had been a delightful adventure, one he knew he would cherish long after the message had been sent or missent. His next attempt at messaging Beatrice, however, would begin with a thorough examination of his phone's settings. Perhaps a factory reset was in order. Until then, he would continue to navigate the treacherous waters of medieval romance with the charmingly unpredictable assistance of his utterly unreliable technological companion. Reginald, his cheeks still flushed from his blackberry-induced ordeal, decided a direct approach was necessary. His previous texting escapades, particularly the infamous Great Picnic Truce text, had earned him a reputation bordering on legendary, albeit slightly erratic. But his current predicament demanded a more formal approach. He needed to explain himself to King Theodore, a man whose sense of humor was as unpredictable as a thunderstorm in a dragon's lair. And the only way to do this, in Reginald's mind, was through the medium of text. The king's throne room was, as expected, imposing. Tapestries depicting glorious and slightly exaggerated battles adorned the walls, while suits of armor stood guard like silent sentinels. King Theodore himself sat upon a throne carved from a single, enormous oak, his expression a mixture of regal boredom and simmering impatience. He was meticulously cleaning his crown with a surprisingly delicate feather duster. Reginald approached cautiously, his phone clutched in his sweaty hand. He'd spent the better part of the morning composing the perfect message, a masterpiece of apologetic prose and strategically placed emojis. He'd even consulted Pip and the Pixies for advice. They suggested a crown emoji, but Reginald opted for a slightly more humble, yet equally regal-looking castle emoji. He typed, "Your Majesty, I humbly apologize for the previous miscommunication regarding the leisurely picnic. Circumstances were unforeseen. My technology, it seems, possesses a mischievous spirit. Castle emoji. I am at your disposal for further clarification, and I swear upon my honor, no more picnics unless sanctioned by the crown itself." He hit send, a bead of sweat tracing a path down his temple. The message sent, he braced himself for the royal response. It arrived with the speed of a rogue arrow, an alarmingly short, terse response that read, "Picnic? Sanctioned? What in the name of Merlin is happening here?" Reginald stared at the screen, his heart sinking faster than a lead weight in a bottomless well. He'd hoped for understanding, perhaps even a chuckle. Instead, he received a message that indicated the royal comprehension was somewhere near zero. He tried to compose a clarifying message, but his fingers fumbled on the keyboard. His phone, as if sensing his growing anxiety, decided to demonstrate its own level of mischief. As he typed the word circumstances, it autocorrected it to circus elephants. Much to his horror, he hastily deleted it, his fingers trembling. He had to explain this, and explain it quickly before his knightly career, and potentially his life, ended up being as messy as a badly organized royal joust. He tapped out another message. "Your Highness, let me assure you, there were no circus elephants involved in my previous text. I meant to say circumstances, as in unexpected events beyond my control. The technology, Your Majesty, has a mind of its own." Confused face emoji. The king's response was immediate. "Circus elephants? What manner of sorcery is this? Release the royal jester. I require some explanation." Angry emoji. Reginald's face paled. The royal jester, a man named Barnaby who specialized in practical jokes of questionable taste and questionable hygiene, was known to have a keen interest in circus elephants. Reginald could practically see Barnaby already scheming up an elaborate elephant-based prank, with Reginald as the unfortunate target. He had to act quickly. He frantically tapped on his phone, his thumbs moving at record speed. His fingers were fumbling, the words mixing and matching, and he was even starting to hallucinate the smell of popcorn, making this feel exactly like a circus. "Your Majesty," he typed, desperation lacing every word. I can explain truthfully. No circus elephants. The technology, the autocorrect, it's a mischievous sprite. The king's reply came in a series of increasingly frantic texts. Mischievous sprite? Is that the new royal court wizard? Send me the details immediately. Question mark emoji. Reginald groaned. He had somehow managed to add to the confusion by unintentionally proposing a brand new court position. He really needed to learn how to use this confounded contraption properly. This was turning into a monumental disaster. He decided on a more direct approach. He typed, "No new wizard, Your Majesty. It's my phone. It changes words. It's a technological gremlin, perhaps? I apologize for the confusion. This was all a misunderstanding." He sent the message and held his breath. The king's response arrived slowly, each letter seeming to take an eternity to appear on the screen. Finally, it arrived. A technological gremlin? Interesting. Perhaps we should consult the royal alchemist. He has experience dealing with strange creatures. Arrange a meeting. And for heaven's sake, Reginald, no more picnics. Reginald slumped against a nearby pillar. He'd managed to avoid immediate punishment, but at the cost of a royal appointment with a somewhat dubious alchemist, whose methods for dealing with strange creatures were rumored to involve copious amounts of bubbling potions and questionable spells. It seemed his quest for romantic success had led him down a path far more chaotic and unpredictable than he could have ever imagined. The simple act of sending a text message had spiraled into a technological, royal, and possibly alchemically infused catastrophe. He looked at his phone, wondering if it was better to just stick to handwritten letters from now on. But then again, where would be the fun in that? In Chapter 2, The Queen's Secret Texts. The tapestries in Queen Eleanor's private chambers depicted scenes of idyllic pastoral life, sheep grazing peacefully, shepherds playing flutes, and suspiciously plump chickens. The reality, however, was far less bucolic. Eleanor, renowned throughout the kingdom for her unwavering composure and sage pronouncements, was currently engaged in a furious texting session with Lady Beatrice, her closest confidant. OMG Beatrice, you will not believe the hat the Duchess wore to the archery competition, Eleanor typed, her nimble fingers flying across the tiny screen of her enchanted device. This wasn't any ordinary phone. It was a marvel of dwarven engineering, disguised as a beautifully carved ivory comb. It was a closely guarded secret, known only to a select few. The reply popped up almost instantly. A hat? Spill the tea, Your Majesty. Was it feathered? Ostrich? Perhaps even gasp? Peacock? Eleanor chuckled, a soft, melodious sound that would have charmed even the grumpiest of court jesters. Worse, Beatrice, worse. It was made entirely of woven turnips, and it was vibrant. She added a series of emojis, a crown, a shocked face, and a rather realistic-looking turnip. Their exchange continued, a whirlwind of royal gossip, fashion critiques, and hushed comments about the king's suspiciously frequent visits to the royal kitchens. Rumor had it he had a fondness for the royal baker's gingerbread men, which were said to be unusually lifelike. Suddenly, a timid knock echoed through the chamber. Eleanor quickly slid the enchanted comb into a secret compartment hidden within her jeweled hairbrush. "Enter," she called out, her voice regaining its usual regal tone. Lady Margaret, the Queen's lady-in-waiting, entered, her face etched with concern. "Your Majesty," she began, curtsying deeply, "Lord Percival requests an audience. He seems agitated." Eleanor sighed inwardly. Lord Percival, a man whose vanity was only surpassed by his questionable fashion sense. He was currently obsessed with wearing mismatched socks, was rarely agitated unless it involved his latest romantic pursuit or a particularly stubborn stain on his favorite doublet. "Show him in," she said, trying to mask the exasperation in her voice. Lord Percival entered, his face a mask of dramatic distress. "Your Majesty," he exclaimed, bowing theatrically, "a crisis of the utmost magnitude. My texting, it has failed me." Eleanor's eyes widened. This was not good. The dwarves' technology, while miraculous, was not without its flaws. She'd previously experienced the infamous, autocorrect apocalypse, which had resulted in a rather awkward missive to the King of France, proposing a marriage between her and his royal corgi. "Explain yourself, Lord Percival," Eleanor said, maintaining her composure while internally bracing herself for the inevitable technological disaster. Lord Percival produced a small, intricately carved wooden box, from which he retrieved a tiny, rather battered device, quite unlike the Queen's elegant comb. "I was attempting to declare my undying devotion to Lady Annalise," he explained, his voice trembling slightly. "But instead, he handed the Queen his device, his fingers quivering. Eleanor examined the screen. The message read, "Dearest Annalise, I long for the toenail clippings, thy errant eyebrows. My heart doth yearn for thee. Forever thine, P." Eleanor fought back a laugh. Even in the realm of technological mishaps, this one stood out. "Lord Percival," she began, trying to suppress a smile, "I believe your device has suffered from a severe case of autocorrect." Lord Percival's face crumpled. "But, Your Majesty, how am I to convey my deep and abiding affection if my technology fails me at this crucial juncture?" Eleanor, ever the resourceful queen, decided to take matters into her own hands. She retrieved her enchanted comb and, with a swift flick of her wrist, discreetly sent a message to Lady Annalise. The message, penned in the Queen's own hand, contained a carefully crafted, flawlessly eloquent expression of Lord Percival's devotion, a far cry from the bizarre text generated by his malfunctioning device. Over the next hour, Eleanor orchestrated a series of secret texting exchanges, guiding various members of her court in their attempts to navigate the complexities of this new form of communication. She helped a love-struck knight amend his accidental proposal to the royal cook. He'd meant to invite her to a dance, not offer her his hand in marriage with a side of roasted pheasant, and guided a disgruntled countess in composing a suitably scathing text to the royal tailor, whose latest creation had resulted in a rather unfortunate wardrobe malfunction during the archery competition. The unfortunate incident involving the Queen and her exploding turnip hat was also suitably addressed in a discreet, if slightly mocking group text between her and her closest confidants. As the sun began its descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Queen Eleanor sat back in her plush chair, her enchanted comb safely tucked away. The day had been fraught with technological mishaps and royal interventions, yet somehow she had managed to maintain her composure, navigating the complexities of medieval court life alongside the bizarre unpredictability of modern technology. She smiled to herself, recognizing the irony. After all, who knew that managing a kingdom and mitigating the chaos of texting could be so intertwined? It was, she concluded, a far more engaging pastime than embroidering tapestries of idyllic pastoral life. And she secretly added, far more fun. As for Lord Percival's future messaging endeavors, she decided perhaps a handwritten letter would be the more sensible approach, at least until the dwarves perfected their autocorrect algorithm. Or perhaps, she mused, she could teach them a lesson or two in the art of eloquent prose. After all, a queen's work is never done. The next morning the castle was abuzz, not with the usual flurry of royal decrees and courtly intrigue, but with a wildfire of whispers and half-truths, all stemming from Queen Eleanor's seemingly innocuous texts. It began, as these things often do, with Lady Beatrice. Beatrice, ever the flamboyant one, had shared snippets of the Queen's turnip hat debacle with Lady Annalise during a seemingly casual embroidery session. Lady Annalise, in turn, had, with a mischievous glint in her eye, embellished the tale considerably, adding details about a purported argument between the Queen and the Duchess involving a stolen ginger cat and a misplaced crown jewel. This embellished version, relayed through hushed tones and furtive glances, quickly morphed into a full-blown saga. By midday, the rumor had reached the royal kitchens, where the cooks, fueled by simmering pots and brewing gossip, had added their own creative flourishes. The turnip hat, originally a source of amusement, now transformed into a monstrous vegetable headdress possessed of magical properties, causing fits of uncontrollable laughter in anyone who dared to look upon it. The ginger cat became a royal sphinx, guardian of a cursed treasure. The king, mid-bite of a particularly delicious gingerbread man, a fact which added fuel to the ongoing speculation about his visits to the royal kitchens, overheard snippets of the conversation as he strolled through the halls. His interpretation was, as usual, rather skewed. He envisioned a vast conspiracy involving the Duchess, the stolen ginger cat, and possibly even a foreign power plotting to undermine his reign, using enchanted turnips as a weapon of mass distraction. This led to a series of increasingly frantic texts to Sir Reginald, his most trusted knight and recipient of many a haphazard royal missive. Reginald, the king's text read, "The turnip. It is sentient. It plots against me. The Duchess is complicit. Send reinforcements. And gingerbread." Poor Sir Reginald, already battling a rather stubborn stain on his own doublet, interpreted the message as a summons to a particularly urgent baking competition. He gathered a team of bakers, armed with flour sacks and rolling pins, and marched towards the royal kitchens, ready to face the formidable threat of sentient turnips. Meanwhile, the rumor reached the stables, where the royal grooms, fueled by boredom and a healthy supply of ale, added their own spin to the tale. The enchanted turnip hat, in their version, possessed the ability to control the royal horses, causing them to spontaneously break into the most elaborate and hilarious of dances. This led to a rather chaotic scene in the royal stables as the grooms frantically tried to prevent the horses from participating in this unexpected equestrian performance. The misinterpretations snowballed, with each new person adding their own unique touch of creative license. The original text message, a simple expression of amusement, had become a sprawling epic tale filled with intrigue, magic, and a healthy dose of absurd hyperbole. The queen, observing this unfolding chaos from her chambers, struggled to maintain a composed exterior. Initially, she found the whole situation rather amusing, but as the rumors reached increasingly absurd proportions, she realized the potential for real trouble. The king's belief in a turnip-led conspiracy, for instance, could lead to some very unwelcome political consequences, and the potentially rebellious horses needed to be calmed down. Eleanor retrieved her enchanted comb, the tiny screen glowing faintly in her hand. She drafted a message to her confidants, Lady Beatrice and Lady Annalise. "Ladies," she typed, "Operation Turnip Hat Damage Control is a go. The king believes the turnip is sentient. The horses are dancing. This calls for a unified front and a strategic deployment of gingerbread." The ensuing texting flurry was a masterpiece of royal diplomacy disguised as casual chatter. Beatrice was assigned to calm the king with carefully chosen words and a particularly large batch of gingerbread. Annalise was dispatched to the stables with a crate of apples and a soothing playlist of medieval lullabies. Eleanor herself would deal with the Duchess, who, unbeknownst to the king, had simply misplaced her favorite ginger cat. The day ended with a surprisingly smooth resolution. The king, satisfied by the exceptional gingerbread provided by Sir Reginald's baking squad and calmed by Beatrice's gentle assurances, eventually concluded the sentient turnip theory was a mere misunderstanding. The horses, after a delightful evening of apple-induced relaxation and medieval lullabies, returned to their usual routine. The Duchess, relieved to find her ginger cat nestled safely under a pile of silks, pledged her undying loyalty to the Queen. As Queen Eleanor reviewed the day's events, she realized that the technology, while sometimes troublesome, had also proven surprisingly useful in managing a crisis. The initial misunderstandings, caused by a simple chain of texts, had led to a series of comical situations, but it also highlighted the interconnectedness of the castle community. The seemingly innocuous messages had, in their own quirky way, strengthened the bonds between the court members, reminding them of their shared dependence on each other and of their ability to overcome even the most absurd challenges, especially when aided by the right amount of strategic deployment of gingerbread. She smiled, the image of the king happily munching on a gingerbread man, completely unaware of the near-royal catastrophe he had averted, making her chuckle. Perhaps the dwarves could improve the autocorrect. Perhaps not. Perhaps, after all, a little healthy chaos was good for the soul, especially when it involved a surprisingly resilient turnip hat and a cast of characters as delightfully eccentric as her own court. She tucked the enchanted comb away, already anticipating tomorrow's misadventures and the exciting possibilities of technological mishaps to come. The Queen's work, she mused, was never truly done, especially in the age of medieval texting. The day after the Great Turnip Hat incident, Queen Eleanor found herself wrestling with a new technological hurdle. She was composing a heartfelt message to Lady Beatrice, her closest confidant, detailing a rather embarrassing encounter with a particularly stubborn goose, the details of which are best left unsaid, when disaster struck. Her enchanted comb, the surprisingly sophisticated device responsible for all the castle's text-based communications, glitched. Instead of sending the message to Beatrice, it inexplicably pinged it to Bartholomew, the court jester. Bartholomew, a man whose comedic timing was only surpassed by his talent for mischief, received the message with a delighted squeak. The Queen's text, intended as a private confession of poultry-related humiliation, was a masterpiece of emotionally vulnerable prose, detailing her battle with the aforementioned goose with a vividness that would have made a seasoned bard weep with laughter. Bartholomew, however, did not weep. He guffawed, he cackled, he nearly choked on his mead. Such was the sheer comedic genius of the Queen's accidental confession. The message, of course, was not entirely private. The Queen, in her attempt to capture the goose's aggressive hissing, had accidentally included a few rather vivid descriptions involving the words feathery fiend, unspeakable indignity, and a surprisingly robust beak. Bartholomew, ever the opportunist, immediately seized upon this linguistic goldmine. First, he strategically screenshotted the message. Then, he employed his considerable skill in artistic manipulation, adding a few strategically placed annotations and humorous additions. For example, he changed unspeakable indignity to unspeakable indignity, involving a surprisingly large amount of goose droppings, and a surprisingly robust beak to a surprisingly robust beak, capable of shattering granite, apparently. His masterpiece of digital tomfoolery completed, Bartholomew subtly broadcast the image to his ever-expanding network of castle gossips. Within minutes, the image was circulating with a speed that even the fastest royal courier couldn't match. The royal kitchens, the stables, and even the royal gardens buzzed with suppressed laughter and hushed whispers. The image, accompanied by Bartholomew's additional annotations, created a completely warped narrative where the Queen's struggle with the goose escalated into a full-blown war involving catapults, enchanted feathers, and several casualties, among them the castle's prize-winning pumpkin. The king, upon seeing the image, was initially bemused. He had grown accustomed to the strange text messages that arrived on his own enchanted quill, but he had never anticipated anything quite so pictorial. He found himself chuckling, imagining his wife in a rather epic battle against a feathered foe. The image of the Queen wielding a rolling pin against a particularly aggressive goose had him in stitches, but his amusement was short-lived. He quickly realized the potential for international incident. An image of the Queen in a compromising situation with a goose could easily be misconstrued, possibly leading to war with neighboring kingdoms. News of this new crisis reached Sir Reginald, who, still recovering from the great turnip hat incident, immediately began drafting a response. However, his attempts to compose a suitable text message were thwarted by his own technological ineptitude. He accidentally sent a series of nonsensical gibberish, mostly involving badly misspelled words related to poultry and weaponry. The result was a series of increasingly frantic texts to the Queen, filled with alarming warnings about goose-related threats and the urgent need for new weaponry. The Queen, meanwhile, was attempting damage control. She had finally managed to locate Lady Beatrice, who, in an act of commendable loyalty, quickly deleted all traces of the goose-related image from her phone and spread reassuring rumors about the Queen's amazing goose-wrangling skills. However, the image had a life of its own. The court jester, realizing the consequences of his actions, tried to issue an apology via a series of frantic texts. However, his attempts to explain his actions were hilariously convoluted and only served to further spread the image's reach and amplify the absurdity of the situation. The apology message, a rambling collection of poorly constructed sentences and emojis, only managed to make matters worse. The ensuing chaos was both hilarious and strangely unifying. The shared experience of the goose-related scandal brought the castle's inhabitants closer together. The cooks, stable hands, and gardeners all found themselves sharing whispers, exchanging variations of the original image and adding their own creative embellishments. The king, eventually persuaded that the goose incident was merely a comical misunderstanding, even joined in the laughter. The situation finally resolved itself when a particularly ingenious royal engineer, after several attempts, managed to disable Bartholomew's ability to send messages. The court jester, faced with the consequences of his actions, was sentenced to a week of cleaning the royal goose pens, a punishment that in hindsight was both fitting and surprisingly effective in resolving his mischievous tendencies. The Queen, looking back on the day's events, found herself chuckling. The technology, while undeniably problematic at times, had brought the castle community closer. The shared laughter, born from miscommunication and technological glitches, created a bond that transcended the usual formalities of court life. She tucked her enchanted comb away, knowing that the next day would undoubtedly bring new adventures, new technological challenges, and an endless supply of opportunities for humorous misunderstandings. After all, what was a reign without a little healthy dose of chaos, especially if it involved a goose and a remarkably talented court jester? The formal dining hall of the castle, usually a scene of hushed elegance and carefully orchestrated etiquette, was currently a whirlwind of suppressed giggles and furtive glances. The Queen, Eleanor, sat rigidly at the head of the long table, her usually impeccable composure slightly ruffled. The reason? Another autocorrect catastrophe, this one of epic proportions. It had all started innocently enough. Eleanor, intending to send a simple message to the Duke of Northumberland confirming his attendance at the upcoming royal ball, had instead unleashed a digital tempest. Thanks to the enchanted comb's capricious autocorrect, her message had morphed into a declaration of war, complete with threats of fiery dragons and an army of goose-riding knights. Fiery dragons? Goose-riding knights? Spluttered Sir Reginald, his face a mask of bewildered horror. He'd received the message moments ago, his own enchanted quill practically vibrating with the sheer absurdity of it all. Your Majesty, are we at war? With geese? The Queen, struggling to maintain her regal composure, dabbed at a non-existent stain on her silk gown. Absolutely not, Sir Reginald. It was a regrettable autocorrect incident. The problem wasn't simply the message's content, it was the timing. The Duke of Northumberland, a man known for his notoriously thin skin and even thinner sense of humor, was notoriously sensitive about any perceived slight. The image of the queen declaring war on him, with geese no less, could spark a full-blown diplomatic crisis. The king, Henry, usually a picture of stoic calm, let out a hearty chuckle. Well, Eleanor, this one takes the cake, doesn't it? War with geese? Only you could manage that. The queen glared at him, her eyes flashing. It's not funny, Henry. This could lead to a complete breakdown of relations with Northumberland. News of the text message had spread like wildfire through the castle. The royal kitchen staff, usually busy preparing elaborate feasts, were now huddled together, whispering excitedly about the impending goose war. The stable hands, meanwhile, were meticulously grooming the royal horses, their faces betraying a mixture of fear and amusement. Even the castle guards, renowned for their stoicism, were exchanging amused glances. The crisis escalated when the enchanted comb, seemingly determined to wreak further havoc, automatically translated a simple request for more wine into a formal demand for the surrender of Northumberland's prized vineyard. The ensuing confusion was deafening. The Duke's response, received moments later, was a rambling message filled with insults, threats, and a rather specific request for a duel involving a giant rocking horse. Sir Reginald, tasked with damage control, attempted to rectify the situation with a series of increasingly desperate and grammatically incorrect messages. His attempts only served to further confuse the issue, resulting in a string of texts that veered from apologies to accusations to elaborate fantasies involving unicorn-pulled chariots and knights armed with oversized turnips. Bartholomew, the court jester, sensing an opportunity for his own brand of mischief, added fuel to the fire. He used his unparalleled access to the castle's messaging system, obtained, he claimed, through a cunning maneuver involving a strategically placed sausage and a distracted royal guard, to create a series of fabricated texts, adding to the already chaotic situation. His first fabricated text, attributed to the Duke, read, "Demand for vineyard surrender is acceptable, providing the Queen sends me the recipe for her gooseberry pie." This was swiftly followed by another, allegedly from the Queen. Gooseberry pie recipe provided, however. I expect a full apology involving a public declaration of love for my magnificent geese. The absurdity of it all had even the most stern members of the court openly giggling. The king, finding himself unable to contain his laughter, joined in the general merriment, his booming laughter echoing through the hall. Chaos reigned. The royal chef was demanding an urgent meeting to discuss the gooseberry pie recipe, while the royal astronomer was attempting to calculate the trajectory of a possible unicorn-pulled chariot assault. The royal physician was preparing a cure for uncontrollable laughter, a problem that was, at that moment, affecting almost everyone in the castle. The situation reached its climax when the Duke of Northumberland himself arrived, his face a mixture of fury and disbelief. He had received yet another autocorrect-induced message, this one detailing the Queen's alleged plans to replace all the royal dogs with highly trained badgers. It was Lady Beatrice, ever the voice of reason, who finally stepped forward. She had discovered the source of the problem, a mischievous gremlin, or possibly a particularly determined squirrel, had been tampering with the enchanted comb's circuitry. After a rather chaotic and hilarious chase involving broomsticks and startled geese, the gremlin was apprehended, its technological mischief brought to an abrupt end. With the culprit caught, the autocorrect disasters ceased, and a sense of calm, albeit a slightly bewildered calm, settled over the castle. The queen, relieved, proposed a toast to the absurdity of it all, a toast that was met with enthusiastic cheers and a promise to implement a better system for royal correspondence, one less prone to gremlins, squirrels, and autocorrect's unpredictable whims. The great autocorrect disaster, as it would later be known, had, in a strange twist of fate, brought the court closer together, proving that even in the most regal of settings, a shared laugh, particularly one involving geese, badgers, and surprisingly accurate autocorrect predictions, could overcome even the most daunting of technological challenges. The incident served as a humbling reminder of the unpredictable nature of technology, even in a kingdom where magic held sway. The night ended, not in diplomatic crisis, but with a grand feast and much merriment, the taste of gooseberry pie, a particularly sweet reminder of the day's unusual events. The Queen's initial attempts at a royal apology were, to put it mildly, disastrous. Her first text, intended to simply say, "My deepest apologies, Duke," instead morphed, thanks to the enchanted comb's continued mischievousness, into a rambling confession of love for gooseberry pie and a detailed account of her childhood fear of badgers. The Duke, already simmering from the earlier accusations of war and vineyard theft, received this missive with a snort of disbelief. His reply was immediate and pointed. "Gooseberry pie? Badgers? My dear Queen, are you certain you're not suffering from some sort of medieval madness brought on by too much mead?" This naturally sent the court into another paroxysm of suppressed giggles. Sir Reginald, whose face had yet to fully regain its color from the previous goose-riding night fiasco, attempted to intervene. His text, aimed at reassuring the Duke, inadvertently transformed into a boast about his own extraordinary skill at juggling flaming torches while riding a unicorn, a skill he, in fact, did not possess. The Duke's response, a picture message showing a rather unimpressed-looking badger wearing a tiny crown, only added to the escalating absurdity. Lady Beatrice, bless her pragmatic soul, suggested a different approach. "Your Majesty," she said, her voice calm amidst the chaos, "perhaps a handwritten letter, delivered by hand, would be less prone to technological mishap." The Queen, however, was determined to master this newfangled communication. "Nonsense, Beatrice. I shall conquer this infernal contraption. An apology via text is the modern way." She proceeded to attempt another apology, meticulously crafting each word on the enchanted comb's screen. The resulting message, while grammatically correct, was profoundly lacking in sincerity. It began with a formal declaration of her lineage, traced back to Charlemagne himself, a somewhat dubious claim, even by royal standards, followed by a detailed analysis of the Duke's heraldic crest, remarkably accurate, though utterly irrelevant to the matter at hand, and concluded with a request for the Duke to attend a royal pigeon racing tournament. The Duke's response, which was essentially a single, exasperated emoji showing a face palm, indicated he'd had quite enough. The situation was rapidly spiraling out of control, threatening to escalate into a full-blown interducal war, this time without the geese. Bartholomew, ever the opportunist, decided to contribute to the chaos with a series of increasingly ludicrous texts, supposedly from the Queen. He claimed she was planning a surprise invasion of Northumberland using giant squirrels trained in the art of knitting, a surprisingly specific military tactic given the circumstances. He followed this up with a message apologizing for the squirrels, but adding that she'd instead send an army of trained badgers equipped with miniature catapults. The king, Henry, usually a picture of stoicism, was finding it increasingly difficult to maintain his composure. He leaned over to the queen, a mischievous twinkle in his eye. "Perhaps," he whispered, "we should consider replacing the enchanted comb with something less temperamental? A carrier pigeon, perhaps?" His suggestion was met with a glare from the queen, who was currently engaged in a digital battle of wits with the Duke over the merits of medieval versus modern warfare tactics. The attempted damage control continued, devolving into a series of increasingly absurd digital exchanges. Sir Reginald, in a desperate attempt to salvage the situation, sent a series of texts containing what he believed to be profound apologies, accompanied by badly drawn digital pictures of himself, bowing deeply. These pictures, due to the comb's faulty algorithms, were constantly transforming into images of Sir Reginald dancing with a badger or riding a goose while wearing a ridiculously oversized crown. The situation reached its apogee when a rogue text, purportedly from the Queen, declared a royal decree. The entire royal court would be forced to participate in a week-long gooseberry pie baking competition, with the prize being a lifetime supply of the Duke's prized vineyard wine. This led to a mass exodus from the dining hall as everyone scrambled to locate the nearest oven and to locate recipes for the elusive gooseberry pie. Even the normally unflappable royal guards began furtively discussing gooseberry pie recipes amongst themselves. It was at this point that Lady Beatrice intervened again. She had identified the real problem. The enchanted comb wasn't simply malfunctioning. It was possessed by a particularly mischievous spirit, not a gremlin nor a squirrel, but a sprite named Pip, who had a penchant for creating digital mayhem. Pip, it turned out, had a deep-seated grudge against the royal family, stemming from an incident involving a stolen fairy cake several centuries prior. After a protracted negotiation involving promises of a lifetime supply of fairy cakes and the creation of a new position, Royal Sprite Liaison, Pip agreed to cease its disruptive activities. The enchanted comb was thoroughly cleansed, using holy water and a surprisingly effective anti-static spray. And finally, a sincere and uncomplicated apology made its way to the Duke. The Duke's response was short and sweet. "Apologies accepted. However, I still expect that gooseberry pie recipe." The ensuing gooseberry pie baking competition was legendary, becoming an annual tradition. The great autocorrect apology, as it came to be known, ultimately served as a potent reminder of the unpredictable nature of technology, even in a kingdom where magic was commonplace, proving that even the most technologically advanced or enchanted communication system could be thwarted by a mischievous sprite and a penchant for gooseberry pies. And most importantly, it brought the court together in shared laughter, reminding everyone that even amidst the chaos of medieval life, there was always room for a good joke, and perhaps a truly delicious pie. Chapter 3. The Peasant's Predicament. Thomas, a man whose beard rivaled the tangled roots of an ancient oak and whose hands were as rough as bark, stared at the small, rectangular device with a mixture of awe and suspicion. It was a marvel, a miracle, a texting contraption. Bartholomew, the opportunistic court jester, who'd somehow managed to acquire a surplus of these technological wonders, had gifted it to him, claiming it was a divine communication amulet bestowed by a particularly generous leprechaun. Thomas, naturally skeptical of leprechauns, but ever hopeful for technological advancements that would improve his already arduous life, decided to give it a whirl. His first text was a masterpiece of peasant frustration. It read, "The weather is atrocious, raining cats and dogs. My turnips are drowning. Send help and ale." He sent it to the Lord Elmsworth, a man whose patience was as thin as the parchment used for his decrees. The Lord, accustomed to receiving exquisitely worded complaints, was taken aback. This abbreviated form of communication was baffling. It was so unlike the elaborate, flowery language normally employed by his disgruntled subjects. The reply came swiftly, a testament to the almost unnervingly immediate nature of this newfangled device. "Turnips drowning? Allez," it read. "Is this some sort of peasant uprising using coded messages? Send reinforcements and a clearer message." Thomas, bewildered by the Lord's misunderstanding, attempted clarification. "No uprising, my lord. Just truly awful weather. Turnips require rescuing. Ale required for morale boosting." He punctuated this with a picture of his sodden turnip patch, a picture of surprisingly decent quality, considering the primitive technology. The Lord's next reply was a simple, "Use a proper bucket." Thomas, utterly defeated by the simplicity of the solution, slumped onto the nearby hay bale. His technological victory quickly soured as he felt the weight of centuries of peasant grievances bearing down on him. The enchanted comb had made a mockery of the Queen's attempts at apology, and here Thomas was failing even in his own simple plea for ale and turnip salvage. He suddenly wished for a more robust system with visual aids, perhaps one where he could include a video of his weeping turnips and the near-empty ale barrel that was already starting to grow some disturbing green algae. Emboldened by the sheer inefficiency of the Lord's solution and fueled by several mugs of surprisingly potent ale, obtained after a much more personal and involved explanation to the local pub owner, Thomas decided to expand his digital complaints. He texted the miller about the inferior quality of flour, the blacksmith about the poor state of his plow, and even the baker about the alarming lack of crust on his bread. His messages, although crude in their brevity, painted a vivid picture of his daily struggles. Each message ended with a variation of, "Fix it. Ale will be rewarded upon improvement." The village, initially amused by Thomas's novel approach to complaining, soon found itself the recipient of Thomas's increasingly detailed, yet still concise reports. The miller responded with a flurry of texts, filled with technical jargon that Thomas couldn't decipher, but which vaguely seemed to involve things like stone grinding efficiency and grain moisture content. The blacksmith, a burly man whose vocabulary extended to mostly grunts and the occasional well-placed curse, simply sent back a thumbs down emoji. The baker, however, responded to Thomas with the only type of communication the baker understood: baked goods. A large, perfectly crusted loaf of bread was sent to Thomas's hut under the guise of a technology failure. News of Thomas's texting exploits spread like wildfire, transforming him from a humble peasant to a digital revolutionary. Other villagers, inspired by his audacity, began experimenting with the texting contraption. The ensuing torrent of messages, complaints about everything from chicken theft to noisy roosters, overwhelmed the already fragile network. The Lord Elmsworth, initially irked by Thomas's audacious use of modern technology, found himself strangely entertained. He began receiving texts from villagers detailing their personal grievances, a direct line to the woes of his subjects that bypassed the traditional layers of feudal hierarchy. He considered it a strange type of public opinion poll, albeit one conducted via a bewilderingly simplistic device that produced baffling errors. One day, a message appeared on Thomas's screen that made his jaw drop. Thomas, meet me at the manor. Ale and turnips will be discussed, and I believe some technological advancements are in order. The Queen wishes to expand this texting initiative. Signed, Lord Elmsworth. Thomas, clutching his miraculous texting device, could barely believe his eyes. His complaints, initially a simple plea for ale and turnip rescue, had unintentionally transformed into a catalyst for change. The turnips, as it turned out, were not the only thing in need of rescue. The entire feudal communication system needed a serious overhaul. As he walked towards the manor, his usually stoic face split into a wide grin. The thought that the entire incident would be immortalized in verse by the village bard filled him with a deep sense of pride, if not a slight queasy feeling caused by overindulging in strong ale and gooseberry pie. His complaints had not only improved his quality of life, they had revolutionized the system. He had become a symbol of peasant empowerment, a digital David against the Goliaths of feudal indifference, and all it had taken was a small, rectangular device and a whole lot of digital complaining. And to think it all started with soggy turnips. He chuckled at the thought of it, picturing the bewildered expressions of the Lord and the Queen as they tried to make sense of his digital complaints. The Lord's thumbs down emoji, in reply to his earlier complaints, felt like a badge of honor, a testament to his pioneering spirit. What followed was a series of meetings where Thomas, armed with his technological expertise and his peasant insight, helped the Lord and his council improve the quality of life in the village, all through the medium of text messages. It was a triumph, and not only for the turnips. The quality of the Lord's ale improved significantly. The miller's flour became famously fine, and the blacksmith's plows were soon the envy of the entire county. The king himself took a keen interest in Thomas's methods, decreeing that every peasant in the kingdom be given a texting device. The age of texting had begun, and it all began with a simple peasant, his soggy turnips, and a newfound love of digital communication. And Ale, of course, There was always ale. The initial amusement at Thomas's digital pronouncements quickly morphed into a full-blown, village-wide phenomenon. Word, or rather text, spread faster than wildfire through the thatched roofs and cobblestone streets. Agnes, the village gossip-monger, whose fingers were as nimble as a squirrel's, retransmitted Thomas's complaints to her extensive network, adding her own colorful commentary and embellishments. Soon, everyone from the scrawny stable boy to the portly butcher was chiming in, each adding their own grievances to the digital deluge. The complaints ranged from the mundane to the absurd. Old man Fitzwilliam lamented the persistent squeaking of his well bucket. Ilara, the baker's daughter, complained about the lack of eligible bachelors in the village. Even the village priest, Father Benedict, sent a text expressing his displeasure with the quality of the church incense. Apparently, it wasn't quite up to snuff, he texted, leaving Thomas utterly bewildered as to what that might mean. The digital cacophony reached a fever pitch, transforming the village into a hive of buzzing, beeping, and occasionally frustrated inhabitants. The village elders, accustomed to receiving complaints in the form of hushed whispers and formal petitions, were utterly unprepared for this technological tsunami. Lord Elmsworth, initially amused by the novelty of it all, found himself overwhelmed by the sheer volume of digital dissent. His attempts at managing the crisis were, to put it mildly, disastrous. His first response was a blanket text to the entire village. Silence. Your incessant texting is disturbing the peace. Return to your normal, non-digital complaining methods immediately. This only served to fuel the flames, prompting a flurry of even more indignant messages, many containing inventive and colorful insults directed at the Lord. One particularly memorable text from Agnes, which somehow circumvented the Lord's attempts to silence the village digital complaints, simply read, "Oh, so now you're concerned about disturbing the peace. What about the squeaking well, my lord?" The next attempt was even more comical. The Lord, advised by his equally bewildered advisor, decided to create a system of complaint prioritization. He established a color-coded system, red for urgent matters, like an impending plague of locusts, yellow for medium-level complaints, such as a slightly burnt roast, and green for inconsequential issues, like a missing shoelace. The villagers, however, refused to cooperate, finding the color-coding system hopelessly arbitrary and overly complicated, sending texts with rainbow-colored emojis to make a point. Meanwhile, Bartholomew, the opportunistic jester, capitalized on the chaos by setting up a texting consultation booth in the village square. For a small fee, paid in ale, of course, he offered assistance in crafting the perfect complaint text, a service that often involved strategically placed emojis and generous helpings of sarcasm. His booth became the hub of the digital rebellion, a testament to both the absurdity of the situation and Bartholomew's unfailing entrepreneurial spirit. The village's predicament escalated to an almost Shakespearean level of chaos. The blacksmith refused to repair tools until his complaints regarding the quality of the coal were addressed, and the miller held the flour hostage, demanding that the Lord compensate him for the substandard wheat that he had received. Even the normally docile sheep seemed to be joining the digital revolt, with several herders reporting mysterious texts containing baffling bleats and emojis resembling wool bales. The situation, initially fueled by Thomas's humble plea for ale and turnip rescue, transformed into a full-fledged digital uprising. The villagers, armed with their newly discovered technological prowess, were voicing their grievances with an unprecedented level of speed and audacity. Realizing the folly of his previous attempts at managing the digital turmoil, Lord Elmsworth finally convened a meeting with Thomas, now considered a reluctant hero of the texting revolution. He offered Thomas a position as a digital liaison officer, a newly created title that essentially tasked Thomas with managing the villagers' complaints and translating them into coherent, non-emoji-laden reports for the Lord. Thomas, still slightly bewildered by the turn of events, accepted the position. His initial reluctance was replaced with a sense of responsibility and a healthy dose of pride. His simple plea for ale and turnip salvation had unintentionally become a catalyst for a much-needed village-wide reformation. The ensuing weeks were filled with a strange blend of technological innovation and medieval governance. Thomas implemented a new system of digital complaint management, using a combination of simple algorithms learned from his interactions with Bartholomew and Agnes, and a deeply ingrained peasant understanding of human nature. He established clear channels of communication, improved the quality of the digital infrastructure, which mostly involved repairing the shaky internet connection, and even created a basic help desk system for the less technically savvy villagers. The result was, surprisingly, a more efficient and responsive governance system. Lord Elmsworth, while still somewhat baffled by the entire texting phenomenon, had to admit that the system was working. The villagers' complaints, previously lost in the bureaucratic maze of feudal hierarchy, were now addressed promptly and effectively. The quality of life in the village improved, and the digital complaints slowly subsided. The age of texting had arrived, and while it started with soggy turnips, it ultimately led to a happier, more connected, and less squeaky, well-afflicted village. And of course, there was still plenty of ale. Lord Elmsworth, a man whose knowledge of governance far outweighed his understanding of technology, stared at the glowing screen of his newly acquired and rather temperamental text messaging device. The rhythmic beeping, a relentless digital drumbeat, was driving him to distraction. His normally pristine study, usually a sanctuary of quiet contemplation and the rustling of parchment, was now a chaotic battlefield of buzzing phones and frustrated sighs. The once orderly piles of legal documents were now overshadowed by a mountain of hastily scribbled notes, attempts to decipher the bizarre shorthand of his digitally disgruntled subjects. "Blast this infernal contraption," he bellowed, flinging a quill across the room with the force of a catapult. It narrowly missed Sir Reginald, his perpetually bewildered advisor, who was attempting to interpret a text message containing nothing but a series of angry-faced emojis and the word turnips. "My lord," Sir Reginald stammered, adjusting his spectacles, I believe they are unhappy." "Unhappy," Lord Elmsworth roared, his face as red as the dragon on his family crest. "Unhappy is a vast understatement. They've turned my manor into a digital cacophony. They're texting about everything from the quality of the ale to the inadequacy of the village well, Even the color of my socks has come under scrutiny. He picked up another text message, this one from Agnes, the village gossip monger. It read, "My lord, your socks clash horribly with your doublet, and the turnips are still soggy." A single perfectly placed eggplant emoji completed the message. An eggplant? Lord Elmsworth sputtered, utterly baffled. What in the name of St. Cuthbert does an eggplant have to do with soggy turnips? Sir Reginald, ever the diplomat, offered a cautious suggestion. Perhaps a visual aid, my lord, to emphasize the undesirable state of the turnips. A visual aid involving an eggplant. Lord Elmsworth scoffed. This is utter madness. This entire texting business is a plague upon the land, worse than the Black Death itself, and potentially just as smelly. His initial attempts at managing the crisis had been, to put it mildly, unsuccessful. The mass text demanding silence had only resulted in a deafening digital chorus of complaints. The color-coded system, inspired by a rather confusing tapestry depicting a particularly colorful battle, had only led to more chaos. Villagers had misinterpreted the color coding scheme, resulting in a text-based revolt fueled by rainbow-colored emojis and conflicting reports. The blacksmith, claiming his red complaint, a broken anvil, had been downgraded to yellow, had refused to shoe the Lord's prized warhorse, leaving the poor creature limping around the stables. Desperation began to set in. Lord Elmsworth, a man accustomed to commanding armies and settling disputes with a stern glare, found himself completely outmatched by the subtle nuances of digital communication. He paced his study, his normally impeccable composure unraveling with each new barrage of text messages. Suddenly, a brilliant, or perhaps wildly misguided idea struck him. He would hold a town hall meeting via text. "Sir Reginald," he announced, a glint of mischief in his eye, "prepare a mass text. I shall address the grievances of my subjects directly, through the medium of this cursed device." The text went out. Hear ye, digital subjects. Your lord will hold a virtual town hall meeting. All complaints must be submitted within the hour. Failure to comply will result in increased taxes. Just kidding, mostly. The response was instantaneous and overwhelming. The texts flooded in, a digital torrent of complaints, requests, and surprisingly creative insults. One villager, clearly inspired by the recent eggplant incident, sent a lengthy text detailing a conspiracy involving the Lord's suspiciously purple-colored plum preserves. Another text contained an intricate poem written entirely in emoji, lamenting the state of the village well. Lord Elmsworth, armed with a pot of tea and an increasingly frantic Sir Reginald, attempted to wade through the deluge. He responded to a complaint about the lack of decent ale with a promise of a barrel delivery. He attempted to resolve a dispute over grazing rights by suggesting a text-based duel of wits, only to be met with a barrage of mocking emojis. As the hour drew to a close, Lord Elmsworth slumped back in his chair, defeated but strangely exhilarated. He had failed to resolve most of the issues, but he had discovered a new appreciation for the creativity and resilience of his subjects, and a terrifying understanding of the power of the eggplant emoji. He realized that managing a digital village required a completely different set of skills than commanding an army. He needed something far more modern, a new kind of warfare, one fought with clever words and well-placed emojis. Maybe he would even need to hire someone to deal with this technological nightmare, a sort of digital knight errant. The age of text messaging had arrived, and Lord Elmsworth, despite his best efforts, was completely unprepared. The battle had begun, and the battlefield was his glowing, beeping, utterly bewildering text messaging device. The war for the digital hearts and minds of his subjects was far from over, and as the sun set on his manor, the faint scent of soggy turnips and impending doom hung heavy in the air, mingled with the lingering aroma of overly sweet plum preserves and the ever-present hum of 1,000 digital complaints. Thomas, a peasant whose knowledge of farming far surpassed his understanding of technology, stared at his newly acquired and remarkably clunky text messaging device. It was a gift from a traveling merchant, a curious contraption of polished wood and gleaming brass, promising instant communication with everyone. The idea filled him with a mixture of excitement and utter terror. Excitement at the prospect of bypassing the usual village gossip chain, and terror at the potential for catastrophic misinterpretations. His first text, a simple request for a loan of a shovel from his neighbor, Giles, resulted in a flurry of replies, completely unrelated to his original message. Giles, apparently, had mistaken shovel for showgirl, leading to a series of increasingly bewildered replies from the entire village. This single text, initially intended for a mundane task, sparked a village-wide digital debate on the merits and demerits of showgirls, their potential contribution to village life, and the shocking lack of suitable venues for such entertainment. The ensuing chaos was, to put it mildly, spectacular. The village baker, inspired by the showgirl discussion, had started a text chain offering specially designed showgirl pastries. The blacksmith, known for his fiery temper and even fierier pronouncements, announced his intention to forge a giant 3-meter-tall showgirl statue using Lord Elmsworth's prized collection of garden gnomes as the raw material. Agnes, the village gossip-monger, naturally took it upon herself to document the entire affair, sending out regular updates filled with dramatic embellishments and liberally sprinkled with exclamation points. Meanwhile, Thomas, completely overwhelmed by the digital maelstrom he had inadvertently unleashed, tried to explain his actual need for a shovel. His attempts were consistently drowned out by a wave of messages about showgirls, pastries, giant gnomes, and Agnes's increasingly elaborate conspiracy theories about the Lord's mysteriously missing collection of gardening gloves. The Lord, still reeling from his own digital debacle, received a barrage of messages concerning the showgirl crisis. He was particularly irked by the blacksmith's proposed use of his gnomes, each of which was a priceless antique. A mass text was swiftly dispatched, a stern rebuke of the whole situation and a demand for immediate cessation of the showgirl-related activities. However, due to a rather unfortunate autocorrect incident, his message was rendered almost incomprehensible. The word cessation was transformed into celebration, transforming his order into a seemingly enthusiastic endorsement of the showgirl spectacle. The villagers, misinterpreting the Lord's accidental approval, saw this as a green light for even more extravagant showgirl celebrations. News of the upcoming festivities spread like wildfire, generating a wave of supportive messages and offers of assistance. Thomas, observing the sheer power of this accidental alliance, had a mischievous idea. He crafted a carefully worded text, feigning deep concern about the state of the village and the obvious injustices that had gone unnoticed for far too long. The text was a masterclass in subtle manipulation, filled with vague insinuations and carefully placed emojis. He sent it to everyone in the village, including the Lord. The villagers, already feeling a collective sense of rebellion, reacted with gusto. They began to flood Lord Elmsworth's text inbox with complaints about practically everything: inadequate water supply, taxes that were too high, the quality of the village ale again, and most importantly, the chronic shortage of showgirl pastries. Meanwhile, Thomas, using his newly discovered technological prowess, coordinated the villagers' actions using a series of carefully coded texts. They organized a protest, a rather unusual one that involved the construction of an enormous catapult constructed from leftover showgirl pastry boxes and strategically placed garden gnomes. Their target was not the Lord's castle, but his prized plum orchard. The siege of the plum orchard was, to say the least, extraordinary. Instead of stones or arrows, they launched pastries shaped like showgirls. The ensuing battle was a chaotic blend of hurled delicacies, strategically positioned text messages, and the occasional, strategically thrown garden gnome. The sheer absurdity of the situation managed to momentarily distract even Lord Elmsworth from his initial shock and fury. The Lord, witnessing the scale of the protest, realized that a direct confrontation would be unwise. He instead sent a cleverly worded text, agreeing to compromise. He would increase the village's water supply, lower the taxes, and incredibly, even fund a showgirl pastry-making workshop. The siege was over, replaced by an uneasy truce, cemented by the shared experience of an utterly absurd showgirl-themed food fight. Thomas, now recognized as a digital rebel leader of sorts, enjoyed his newfound fame, and the village's ale supply improved significantly. The Lord, wiser to the intricacies of both medieval governance and modern technology, decided to invest in a more user-friendly communication system. As for the showgirl pastries, they became a permanent fixture at the village bakery, a testament to the unusual power of a simple, misinterpreted text message and the unexpected alliance it forged. The age of text messaging in the medieval world was proving to be far more complicated and much funnier than anyone could have anticipated. The digital revolution was in full swing, and it smelled deliciously of sugary showgirls and soggy turnips. The battle for the hearts, minds, and stomachs of the villagers was far from over. A new, text-based era had begun, and amidst the chaos, even Lord Elmsworth had to admit that it was, despite everything, rather amusing. The initial chaos surrounding the showgirl incident had subsided, leaving behind a peculiar calm. The village, once a tapestry of whispered secrets and shouted pronouncements, now hummed with the quiet buzz of countless text messages. The air, once thick with the smell of wood smoke and freshly baked bread, now carried a faint, lingering aroma of sugary pastries and the unexpected scent of digital revolution. Thomas, the accidental instigator of this technological upheaval, found himself a reluctant leader. His initial fear of the text messaging device had been replaced by a grudging respect, even a touch of admiration. He discovered that the clunky contraption, initially a source of frustration, was a surprisingly effective tool for manipulating, well, everything. He'd learned the art of the strategically placed emoji, the power of the vague insinuation, and the surprising effectiveness of a well-timed, slightly cryptic text message. Giles, whose initial misunderstanding had ignited the entire showgirl saga, was now a surprisingly adept texter. He'd mastered the art of the group text, using it to coordinate elaborate baking schemes and organize impromptu gnome rescue missions. The gnomes, thankfully, had been recovered from the blacksmith's workshop, albeit slightly singed around the edges. His showgirl pastries, once a source of amusement, had become legendary, their intricate designs reflecting the village's evolving digital landscape. Agnes, the village gossip, had transformed herself into a one-woman news agency. Her texts, once filled with dramatic embellishments and speculative pronouncements, were now surprisingly accurate, containing up-to-the-minute updates on everything from the Lord's latest decrees to the availability of fresh turnips. Her detailed chronicles of village life, complete with emojis that depicted everything from the brewing ale's state to the Lord's mood, became eagerly awaited by the entire village, as much for their accuracy as for her deliciously witty commentary. Even the blacksmith, known for his notoriously short fuse and an even shorter sentences, had embraced the digital age. His texts were typically concise, bordering on brutal, but they proved surprisingly effective in conveying his various needs. He'd even created a special system of emojis to describe the various stages of his iron forging process, a digital innovation that had garnered him much admiration among the villagers. The Lord, however, remained a digital enigma. While he'd initially reacted with fury to the showgirl incident, he'd learned a valuable lesson. Ignoring the technological tide would lead only to more plum orchard sieges. He'd invested in a state-of-the-art, for the time, text messaging device, with a built-in autocorrect feature that actually seemed to work. He'd also started using emojis, albeit somewhat cautiously, his favorites being the regal-looking crown and a slightly suspicious-looking eye. His attempts to regain control of the digital narrative, however, were often hindered by his stiff, formal writing style that, even in abbreviated forms, was often misunderstood. His efforts to be digitally austere often resulted in hilarious misinterpretations. The once static social hierarchy of the village had undergone a subtle yet significant transformation. The traditional power structures, based on land ownership and social standing, had been challenged by the democratizing force of text messaging. Everyone, from the humblest peasant to the Lord himself, was now part of a constantly evolving, digitally mediated communication network. The village meetings, once characterized by shouting matches and heated debates, were now conducted through a series of carefully orchestrated group texts. The villagers would discuss village matters, debate taxes, and plan their next social gathering via text messages, leading to an increase in efficiency and a surprising decrease in the number of shouting matches. News from the outside world, once carried by weary travelers, now arrived through a flurry of messages from traveling merchants. They shared news of distant kingdoms, upcoming festivals, and the latest gossip from neighboring villages, their text messages serving as a window into a broader digital world, far more interconnected than the villagers ever could have imagined. The previously isolated village had opened itself up to new connections, new ideas, and new challenges. The accidental showgirl incident had not only created chaos, but it also inadvertently fostered a sense of unity, transforming the village from a collection of isolated individuals into a coherent, digitally connected community. Thomas, observing the ongoing digital transformation, realized that the power of text messaging extended beyond mere communication. It was a tool for social change, a way to challenge authority, and a catalyst for unexpected alliances. He continued to experiment, using his newfound expertise to improve the lives of his fellow villagers. He organized virtual bake sales, facilitated the repair of the village well via group text coordination, and even managed to negotiate a better price for turnips from the local merchant using subtle textual maneuvering. His reputation grew. He was no longer just Thomas the peasant. He was Thomas, the digital innovator, the text message maestro, the unlikely hero who had taught a medieval village the power of the emoticon and the sheer hilarity of accidental miscommunication. One crisp autumn evening, as the village prepared for their annual harvest festival, Thomas looked upon the scene with a sense of quiet satisfaction. The air was filled with the scent of roasting meat and freshly baked bread, the sounds of laughter and music filling the night. The digital hum of countless texts mingled with the sounds of celebration, a testament to the extraordinary way the village had embraced its new era of communication. The showgirl pastries, once a symbol of digital chaos, were now a staple of the harvest festival, their appearance marked with cheers and the continued use of ever more creative emojis to describe their taste. The Lord, observing the festivities from his castle, smiled. He had initially viewed text messaging as a disruption, a threat to the established order. Now he saw its potential. He'd even drafted a text message to Thomas, expressing his gratitude for the unexpected improvements in the village life. Although the message was currently stuck in his device due to an ongoing debate over the best emoji to express genuine appreciation, a crown or a slightly less suspicious eye. The age of text messaging was not just a technological shift, it was a social revolution, and everyone in the village, including the Lord, was trying to keep up with the changes, albeit with hilarious results. The new era was only just beginning, filled with the promise of more miscommunications, more innovation, and a lot more deliciously chaotic digital adventures. Chapter 4: The Tournament of Texts. The crisp autumn air, thick with the scent of wood smoke and anticipation, vibrated with a nervous energy. The annual harvest festival was underway, but this year, a new element had been added to the festivities: the grand texting tournament. Organized by Thomas, the unlikely digital revolutionary, the tournament promised to be a spectacle of witty wordplay and emoji acrobatics, a competition to determine the ultimate text message maestro of the village. The tournament grounds, usually reserved for jousting matches and other displays of brute strength, were transformed. Instead of lances and shields, tables laden with quill pens, parchment, and the village's collections of slightly battered text messaging devices were set up. A makeshift stage, adorned with strings of brightly colored, hand-dyed, of course, bunting, served as the arena for the textual gladiators. The contestants, a motley crew representing every social stratum of the village, were a sight to behold. Jails, the pastry master, nervously adjusted his spectacles, his fingers itching to compose a message that would capture the perfect balance of culinary artistry and digital wit. Agnes, the village gossip, sharpened her quill with the same intensity she usually reserved for crafting her scandalous pronouncements, her eyes darting around, assessing her competition with a hawk-like gaze. Even the blacksmith, his normally soot-stained apron replaced by a surprisingly pristine tunic, looked strangely apprehensive, his mighty hands hovering over his text messaging device like a falconer over his prize bird. The rules were simple, yet deceptively complex. Each contestant would be given a series of prompts, each more absurd than the last. Their task was to craft a text message that not only addressed the prompt, but also demonstrated exceptional creativity, wit, and of course, masterful use of emojis. The judges, a panel consisting of the Lord, who despite his initial skepticism, had become a surprisingly enthusiastic participant in the digital revolution. Thomas and Agnes would then evaluate each message based on its originality, humor, and technical proficiency. The first prompt, announced by Thomas with a flourish, was compose a text message to summon reinforcements, but accidentally send a message about a picnic. The contestants scribbled furiously, their quills scratching across the parchment, their faces a mixture of concentration and amusement. Giles's entry: Sir Reginald, siege imminent, bringing extra sausage rolls. Hope you like mustard. A creative attempt, the judges agreed, but perhaps a bit too light-hearted for a genuine siege. Agnes's entry: My liege, barbarians at the gate, but the weather is simply divine, perfect for a spot of tea. A masterclass in dramatic irony, but some felt it lacked the urgency of a real-life crisis. The blacksmith, ever concise, simply texted, Need help, picnic, bring hammers. Brutal, effective, and surprisingly accurate, although no one was quite sure if the hammers were for construction or for fighting off the attacking horde. The Lord, ever the formal one, struggled with the autocorrect on his device, ultimately sending the rather confused message. The enemy approaches, I say, quite agreeable weather for a repast. Request reinforcements promptly. His attempt was noted for the ambition of its formal tone, juxtaposed with the emoticons, which came across as rather alarmingly sincere and hilariously out of sync with the intended sense of the message. The next prompt was even more challenging. Express your undying love to your beloved, but accidentally use the wrong words. The air crackled with anticipation as the contestants grappled with this emotionally charged yet technologically fraught task. The results were, predictably, chaotic and hilarious. One contestant confessed his love by accidentally sending a message about his prize-winning turnips. Another, in an attempt to describe his beloved's beauty, accidentally compared her to a particularly plump goose. The blacksmith, in a rare moment of poetic expression, texted, "My heart, like molten iron for thee, very hot, slightly runny." The judges erupted in laughter. It was wonderfully graphic and oddly touching in its way. Agnes, true to form, managed to weave a tale of unrequited love, lost dreams, and accidentally sent messages intended for completely different recipients. The entire village was by this point completely engrossed in the event, with a mixture of laughter and awe, the digital mishaps and creative use of emoticons making it the best harvest festival they had ever attended. The sheer brilliance of the mishap-laden messages led to hearty laughter across the entire village. The tournament continued, each round bringing forth a fresh wave of hilarious miscommunications and wonderfully creative attempts. The contestants, although initially nervous, had begun to loosen up, finding their digital footing, unleashing their inner comedic geniuses. The atmosphere was electric, a potent mix of nervous energy, competitive spirit, and unadulterated fun. The village, having found a new way to express themselves and connect, forgot all about the usual petty grievances and enjoyed the creative spectacle unfold before them. Finally, after hours of laughter and textual creativity, a winner emerged. It was surprisingly the blacksmith. His messages, though concise and often brutally honest, possessed a unique charm, a raw authenticity that resonated with the judges. His ability to encapsulate complex emotions and situations in a few well-chosen words and relevant emoticons was, in their opinion, truly remarkable. The prize, a year's supply of his own hand-forged tools and a very large, extremely decadent showgirl pastry, was awarded with much fanfare. The blacksmith, usually a man of few words, expressed his gratitude with a simple but heartfelt text message. "Thanks, best pastry ever." The grand texting tournament was more than just a competition. It was a testament to the power of communication, the beauty of imperfection, and the undeniable hilarity of a medieval village, embracing a truly modern technology with the same energy and enthusiasm as they did their traditional harvest celebrations. As the festivities continued, the villagers, exhausted but exhilarated, continued to text, to laugh, and to celebrate the delightful chaos that the digital revolution had brought to their lives. The harvest festival, coupled with the tournament, was a resounding success, and the village continued its merry digital adventures well into the night, the sounds of laughter echoing through the valley, interspersed with the rhythmic click-clack of text messaging devices, their little screens a glowing beacon in the darkness. The digital age had arrived, and it was, undoubtedly, here to stay. The final round of the grand texting tournament arrived, the tension palpable even amidst the lingering laughter from previous rounds. The remaining contestants, a surprisingly diverse bunch considering their initial apprehension, were a study in contrasting emotions. Giles, the pastry chef, nervously chewed his lip, a tiny smear of flour clinging to his cheek. Agnes, the village gossip, radiated a quiet confidence, her eyes gleaming with competitive fire. And the blacksmith, surprisingly, displayed an almost serene calm, his large hands resting on his surprisingly nimble thumbs as he worked the crude text messaging device. The final prompt, revealed with a flourish by Thomas, the tournament's eccentric organizer, was a doozy. Compose a sonnet in text message format about the unexpected joys of accidentally sending a message to the wrong person. The crowd gasped. A sonnet in text messages. This was clearly beyond the capabilities of even the most experienced texter. Even the judges looked stunned. The Lord, his face a mask of both amused disbelief and dawning horror, muttered, "A sonnet? By text? This is utter madness." The contestants, however, took the challenge with surprising gusto. Giles, ever the optimist, attempted a whimsical take on the prompt, his message a charmingly chaotic string of misspelled words, misplaced emojis, and unintended rhymes. His attempt, while ultimately failing to meet the formal requirements of a sonnet, was undeniably amusing. It recounted the tale of a misplaced love message, ending with the delightful revelation that the intended recipient's grumpy uncle had actually fallen in love with the message itself. Agnes, the master of dramatic irony, crafted a truly epic sonnet, albeit one told through a series of increasingly bizarre and unintentionally hilarious text message exchanges with an assortment of completely unrelated villagers. Her messages detailed the heartbreak of unrequited love, the unexpected joys of accidental miscommunication, and the surprising comfort to be found in the most unlikely of correspondences. The judges were particularly impressed by the deft way she managed to weave a complex narrative thread through the fragmented format of the text messages. But it was the blacksmith, the quiet giant of the tournament, who ultimately stunned everyone. He approached the challenge with his characteristic bluntness. He didn't try to force a sonnet form, or even adhere to the strict rules of rhyming or rhythm. Instead, he delivered a series of stark, impactful text messages, each one a perfectly crafted miniature poem. He began with a simple, direct message. Wrong number, right words. This was followed by a series of succinct texts, each more powerful than the last. His messages spoke of unexpected connections forged through accidental mishaps, of hidden depths revealed through unintended communication, of the beautiful chaos that arose from a world where human error could lead to moments of genuine connection. His messages were raw, honest, and profoundly moving. They lacked the elegance of a traditional sonnet, but they possessed something far more valuable, genuine emotional depth. The judges, initially shocked by his unconventional approach, were captivated by the power of his words. They found themselves rereading his messages, each concise text resonating with a surprising profundity. The Lord, typically a stickler for tradition, found himself nodding in silent approval. Even Agnes, the queen of dramatic irony, was impressed by the blacksmith's stark honesty. Thomas, usually bursting with excitable commentary, sat speechless, stunned into silence by the unexpected emotional resonance of the blacksmith's messages. The final decision was a long and arduous one. The judges, caught between Giles's charming chaos, Agnes's masterful dramatic irony, and the blacksmith's raw emotional power, were deeply conflicted. They debated the merits of each approach, each contestant having brought their unique strengths to the table. They discussed the technical proficiency of each message, the originality of the approach, and the overall impact on the audience. The decision was far from unanimous, but ultimately the judges found themselves leaning in favor of the blacksmith's raw authenticity. The announcement of the winner was met with a roar of surprised approval from the crowd. The blacksmith, typically a man of few words, simply offered a wry smile and a nod, his expression betraying a hint of disbelief. The prize, a year's supply of his own hand-forged tools, and an even more spectacular pastry than the showgirl creation from earlier rounds, was presented with much fanfare. He accepted the prize with a modest bow, his usual gruff demeanor replaced by a genuine warmth. As the dust settled on the tournament, it was clear that the event had been more than just a simple competition. It had been a journey of unexpected discovery. It was a testament to the randomness of life, the surprising connections we make, and the beautiful things that can arise from the chaos of miscommunication. The villagers, initially gathered for a simple harvest festival, were now imbued with a shared understanding, a collective appreciation for the beauty of unintended consequences, for the unpredictable nature of both technology and human connection. The blacksmith's victory was a symbol of this understanding, a testament to the power of authenticity and the unexpected joys to be found in the simplest of moments. His concise, honest messages, far from being dismissed as clumsy or lacking, were seen as profoundly moving, their lack of elaborate embellishment underscoring their raw emotional power. The tournament, with its blend of technical challenges and emotional depth, brought a new level of understanding and appreciation to the village, forging connections where there were once none. The evening continued with a vibrant celebration, the air alive with the buzz of conversation and the occasional tap, tap, tap of text messages. The villagers, filled with a new sense of community and shared experience, shared their laughter and their stories, their digital messages weaving a tapestry of connection as rich and varied as the tapestry of their lives. The unexpected winner of the tournament, the blacksmith, became a local hero, his blunt honesty and surprising emotional depth having captivated the entire village. His victory wasn't just a win for him, it was a win for authenticity, a celebration of the unexpected beauty to be found in the randomness of life and the power of genuine human connection. The Grand Texting Tournament, a chaotic and hilarious event born from a whimsical idea, had unexpectedly changed the social fabric of the village, proving that sometimes the greatest discoveries are found not in planning, but in embracing the unpredictable. The air crackled with anticipation as Thomas, the tournament organizer, a man whose enthusiasm bordered on manic, waddled to the center of the makeshift stage, a hastily constructed platform of hay bales and discarded barrels. He adjusted his spectacles, precariously perched on his nose, and cleared his throat, a sound like gravel tumbling down a hill. "And now," he announced, his voice booming across the assembled villagers, "for the moment we've all been waiting for, the awarding of the grand prize." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Even the usually stoic Lord Bartholomew seemed to lean forward, his usually impassive face betraying a flicker of curiosity. Agnes, the village gossip, preened, certain of her victory. Giles, the pastry chef, clutched a half-eaten gingerbread man, his knuckles white, and the blacksmith, surprisingly, seemed utterly unfazed, his gaze fixed on a particularly stubborn knot in a piece of wood he was whittling. Thomas produced a large, ornately decorated chest from behind the hay bales. It was clearly far too heavy for him to carry comfortably, judging by the way his knees buckled slightly under its weight. He heaved it onto the stage with a grunt, the sound echoing the collective anticipation in the crowd. "Inside this magnificent chest," he declared, his voice thick with dramatic flair, "lies a prize beyond measure, a treasure beyond compare, a year's supply of—" He paused for dramatic effect, drawing out the suspense, his face contorted in a theatrical display of struggle. "Sescu goose feathers." A stunned silence fell over the crowd. A year's supply of goose feathers? The grand prize of the grand texting tournament, an event that had captivated the entire village, was goose feathers? Agnes's jaw dropped. Giles's gingerbread man crumbled in his hand. Even the Lord Bartholomew looked utterly bewildered. Only the blacksmith remained unaffected, calmly continuing his whittling. The silence was broken by a ripple of confused murmurs. "Goose feathers?" Someone squeaked. "But see, why?" another asked, his voice laced with disbelief. Thomas, however, seemed oblivious to the collective bewilderment. He beamed, his eyes sparkling with mischievous glee. "Yes, my friends, a year's supply of the finest goose feathers this side of the kingdom," he exclaimed, as though this were the most obvious and desirable prize imaginable. He proceeded to explain his reasoning, a rambling, slightly unhinged monologue about the importance of quill pens, the artistry of calligraphy, and the superior softness of goose-down pillows. He spoke passionately, his words tumbling over each other in a torrent of enthusiastic nonsense. The crowd, however, remained unimpressed, their initial excitement replaced by a mixture of confusion and mild disappointment. The blacksmith, his eyes still fixed on his whittling, let out a low chuckle, the sound barely audible above Thomas's enthusiastic ramblings. The award ceremony, if one could call it that, proceeded with a certain air of surreal absurdity. Thomas, seemingly unperturbed by the lack of enthusiasm, distributed the goose feathers with meticulous care, handing out armfuls of fluffy white plumes to each contestant. Agnes, still reeling from the unexpected turn of events, accepted her prize with a sniff. Giles, his dreams of winning a year's supply of exquisite pastries dashed, muttered something about the potential of using the feathers to decorate his next cake creation. The blacksmith, however, surprised everyone again. He took his goose feathers with a casual shrug, a small, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. He then pulled out a small, intricately crafted leather pouch from his tunic. From the pouch, he produced a single, perfectly formed goose feather, identical to the ones Thomas had just distributed. He held it up to the light, turning it slowly between his fingers. "I already have a year's supply," he stated simply, his voice calm and unassuming. "This one, however, this is a feather unlike any other." The crowd shifted their attention to the blacksmith's feather. It was indeed special. It seemed to shimmer in the light, radiating a subtle warmth. Whispers spread through the crowd. Some said it was enchanted. Others claimed it possessed magical properties. The blacksmith just smiled and replaced the feather into his leather pouch, offering no further explanation. Thomas, still caught up in his enthusiasm for goose feathers, continued his rambling monologue, oblivious to the sudden shift in attention. The villagers, however, were no longer listening to him. Their eyes were fixed on the blacksmith, their curiosity piqued by his mysteriously special feather. The grand prize of the tournament, it seemed, was not the goose feathers, but the blacksmith's enigmatic feather, a prize far more intriguing and mysterious than anything Thomas had envisioned. The evening continued, the atmosphere shifting from mild disappointment to a strange, excited hum. Conversations buzzed around the blacksmith's feather, speculation intertwining with discussions about the tournament's unexpected conclusion. The goose feathers themselves had become a strange source of humor. The villagers were laughing about the irony of the situation, the absurdity of it all. The blacksmith remained mysteriously silent about his prized feather, content with the sudden shift in attention that had transformed him from a quiet competitor into a village enigma. The tale of the grand texting tournament's grand prize became a legend, a testament to the unexpected twists and turns of life, the absurdity of plans, and the unpredictable nature of both technology and medieval village life. The blacksmith, once a humble blacksmith, was now a local legend, his enigmatic feather symbolizing the tournament's unexpected and delightful chaos. He never revealed the secrets of his special feather, maintaining his quiet dignity. The goose feathers, though initially disappointing, became an unexpected symbol of the community's shared laughter and their tolerance for the bizarre twists of fate. The tournament, in its own peculiar way, had brought the village closer than ever before, creating a shared history laced with humor and a touch of the inexplicable. And that, perhaps, was the real prize. The evening ended, not with a bang, but with a collective, contented chuckle, a testament to the unifying power of shared absurdity. The tap, tap, tap of text messages continued, but now they carried a different tone, a tone of camaraderie, of shared experience, of a community bonded by a hilariously unexpected goose feather incident. The blacksmith's cryptic smile echoed the mysterious charm of his special feather, turning him into a local celebrity whose legend lived on, not in goose feathers, but in the whispers of a uniquely absurd grand prize. The aftermath of the great texting tournament wasn't exactly what anyone had anticipated. The initial disappointment over the goose feathers, a prize that seemed less like a reward and more like a practical joke, gradually gave way to a strange, communal buzz. Agnes, initially mortified by the underwhelming prize, found herself unexpectedly popular. Her complaints about the feathers, delivered with her signature dramatic flair, became the subject of much amusement. She even managed to turn the situation to her advantage, charging a small fee for personalized goose feather consultations, where she offered advice, or mostly unsolicited, on the best ways to use the fluffy prizes. Giles, the pastry chef, initially devastated, had a surprising epiphany. He discovered that finely ground goose feathers, when mixed with a specific type of flour, created a uniquely light and airy texture in his cakes. His feather-light delights, as he called them, became the village sensation, proving that even disappointment could lead to unexpected culinary triumphs. His text messages, previously filled with desperate pleas for baking supplies, now boasted triumphant updates on his newfound feather-based culinary innovations. Lord Bartholomew, initially puzzled, found himself strangely intrigued by the collective reactions to the goose feathers. He saw in the shared laughter and unexpected camaraderie a strengthening of the village bond. He commissioned a large tapestry depicting the tournament, with a particularly prominent image of the blacksmith and his mysterious feather, subtly emphasizing the unifying power of shared absurdity. His own text messages, usually reserved and formal, took on a slightly more humorous tone, much to the amusement of his usually stiff upper-lipped advisors. The blacksmith, however, remained the center of attention. His enigmatic feather, a symbol of quiet power and untold mystery, transformed him from an unassuming village artisan into a local celebrity. Whispers about his feather's potential magical properties spread like wildfire. Some claimed it could cure illnesses. Others believed it could predict the future. One particularly imaginative villager even started a rumor that the feather held the key to a hidden treasure buried somewhere within the village. This surge in the blacksmith's popularity had unforeseen consequences. His forge, once a quiet place of hammering and sparks, was now constantly surrounded by curious onlookers, hoping for a glimpse of the legendary feather. He found himself inundated with requests, not just for his usual blacksmithing services, but for feather blessings and prophetic interpretations based on the supposedly mystical qualities of his prized plume. His text messages, once few and far between, now buzzed with requests, offers of marriage proposals from at least 3 enthusiastic widows, and even a few cryptic threats from a rival blacksmith, envious of his newfound fame. The village itself underwent a transformation. The annual Goose Feather Festival was born, a celebration of the tournament's bizarre outcome. The festival featured feather-themed games, goose feather-based culinary competitions, inspired by Giles's success, and a grand goose feather parade, where villagers proudly displayed their prize feathers in elaborate costumes and contraptions. The blacksmith's cryptic text messages, usually one-word responses, became legendary, their enigmatic brevity adding to his mystique. The most significant change, however, was in the village's communication style. Texting, initially a source of confusion and hilarious mishaps, had become a unifying force. The villagers, having collectively experienced the absurdity of the goose feather incident, seemed to have developed a newfound appreciation for the humorous potential of modern technology. Their texts, while still occasionally plagued by autocorrect errors, were now infused with a shared sense of humor and mutual understanding. Even Lord Bartholomew found himself composing clever, slightly sarcastic replies to his advisor's texts, a far cry from his previous formal communication style. The goose feathers themselves, initially symbols of disappointment, transformed into unexpected emblems of community and shared laughter. They appeared as decorations in homes, as ornaments on clothing, and even as unusual embellishments on the village's newly erected text message-shaped maypole. The entire village, from Agnes the gossip to Lord Bartholomew, seemed to have embraced the unexpected absurdity, finding humor and unity in their shared experience of the great texting tournament and its ridiculously fluffy grand prize. The once ordinary goose feather had become a symbol, a reminder of how a seemingly trivial event could have such a profound an unexpected impact on the social fabric of a medieval village. The blacksmith, observing the changes from his newly elevated status, simply smiled. He never revealed the secret of his special feather, preferring to let its mystique remain intact. His silence, however, spoke volumes. It was a quiet testament to the power of shared experience, of the unifying force of laughter, and of the ability of a simple goose feather, or the bizarre mishaps of technology, to reshape a community and its communication styles. The story of the Great Texting Tournament and its unexpected consequences became a legendary tale, passed down through generations, a testament to the quirky and unpredictable nature of life, even in a medieval village equipped with the seemingly anachronistic convenience of text messaging. It was a story about the absurdity of grand prizes, the unexpected benefits of disappointment, and the unifying power of laughter, all spiced with the peculiar charm of a cryptic blacksmith, his enigmatic feather, and the persistent tap 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 of medieval text messages. And somewhere, in a dusty old chest, countless goose feathers served as a silent reminder of the day the most unlikely prize unexpectedly brought a medieval village together. The laughter, it seemed, echoed longer than the initial disappointment. The grand texting tournament, with its chaotic climax and oddly satisfying resolution, had irrevocably altered the social fabric of the village, reminding everyone of the unpredictable, often hilarious, and surprisingly bonding nature of life's strange turns of events. And it all started with a simple, albeit slightly misplaced, text message. The annual Goose Feather Festival, a direct consequence of the great texting tournament's surprisingly fluffy prize, was a resounding success. Villagers, decked out in elaborate goose feather costumes, some resembling magnificent feathered dragons, others more akin to walking, fluffy pillows, paraded through the village square. Children played games involving feather throwing and feather catching, their laughter echoing against the medieval stone buildings. Giles, the pastry chef, won the inaugural Featherlight Delight competition, his feather-infused cakes proving to be as popular as ever. Agnes, meanwhile, presided over her goose feather consultation booth, dispensing her often questionable advice with a theatrical flair that had become her trademark. Lord Bartholomew, observing the festivities from his balcony, couldn't help but smile. The initial disappointment over the tournament's prize had, against all odds, fostered a sense of unity and shared absurdity within the village. He'd even taken to texting his advisors with increasingly witty and sarcastic messages, much to their initial shock and subsequent amusement. Their formal replies, once crisp and devoid of humor, now contained a subtle, almost hesitant attempt at lightheartedness. The rigid social hierarchy of the village seemed to have softened, at least slightly, under the influence of the ubiquitous tap 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 of text messages and the shared experience of the goose feather fiasco. The blacksmith, however, remained an enigma. He continued to receive an overwhelming number of text messages, marriage proposals, requests for feather blessings, and even the occasional cryptic threat from his rival blacksmith, but responded with his usual one-word replies. His cryptic messages, once simply a quirk, now added to his already legendary status. The villagers, having grown accustomed to his enigmatic communication style, seemed to find a strange satisfaction in deciphering his sparse but potent texts. It was as if his monosyllabic responses held a hidden depth, a mysterious wisdom only understood through the shared context of their collective experience. The village elder, a woman known for her dry wit and sharp observations, remarked, "The blacksmith's texts are like riddles wrapped in an enigma, served with a side of goose feathers." Her comment, relayed through a series of amused texts, became a popular saying in the village, highlighting the acceptance and even celebration of the unusual communication style. The impact of texting on the village extended beyond the immediate aftermath of the tournament. Previously, communication relied on word of mouth, letters that took weeks to arrive, and the occasional town crier. Now, news spread with unprecedented speed, even if it often arrived in a slightly garbled or autocorrect mangled form, a misplaced K here, an extra E there. These typographical mishaps, once sources of frustration, were now accepted as part of the village's unique textual dialect. They became inside jokes, shared and laughed about in a way that further strengthened the village bonds. The shift wasn't merely in the speed of communication, but in its tone. The villagers had learned to appreciate the humor in miscommunication. Their texts, while still occasionally riddled with errors, were infused with a shared sense of playful irony and collective absurdity. Lord Bartholomew's formal correspondence, once a testament to medieval etiquette, now carried a subtle undercurrent of wit and sarcasm, a sign of his newfound appreciation for the lighter side of communication. The introduction of texting, initially met with confusion and occasional chaos, had ultimately transformed the village's social fabric. It fostered a sense of community, encouraging interaction and creating a shared language, a blend of medieval formality and modern technological informality. The once rigid social hierarchy, softened by the collective experience of the great texting tournament, had become more fluid, replaced with a shared sense of humor and mutual understanding. The once isolated villagers were now connected in a new way, their texts bridging the gap between tradition and technology, formality and wit. The goose feather, initially a symbol of disappointment, had been unexpectedly transformed into a symbol of unity and shared laughter. It was a testament to the ability of unforeseen circumstances to shape a community, fostering unexpected bonds and creating shared memories. Even the most mundane objects, in this case, a humble goose feather, could become imbued with meaning, significance, and a touch of the absurd. As the years passed, the story of the great texting tournament, its ridiculously fluffy prize, and the transformative effects of texting on medieval society became a legendary tale. It was a story of how a simple technological mishap could have profoundly unexpected consequences, a tale that was retold and embellished with each passing generation. It served as a reminder of the unifying power of laughter, the unexpected benefits of disappointment, and the ability of a single goose feather to redefine a community's identity and communication styles. The blacksmith, now a local legend, continued to send his cryptic one-word replies, adding to the mystery and mystique surrounding his personality. His reticence, however, became a silent testament to the power of shared experience and the unpredictable nature of life. His silence spoke volumes, a subtle acknowledgment of the unexpected bonds forged through shared laughter and the oddly satisfying resolution to a tournament that had begun with chaos and ended with unity. And so, the village, once a quaint medieval settlement, evolved into a unique blend of tradition and modernity. The villagers, now masters of the art of medieval texting, navigated the complexities of life, their communication laced with wit, absurdity, and a shared understanding born from the unexpected consequences of the great texting tournament. The story serves as a whimsical reminder of the unpredictable nature of life, the power of shared laughter, and the ability of even the most unlikely of events, such as a goose feather prize, to leave an indelible mark on the social fabric of a community. The tap, tap, tap of text messages continued, echoing through the village, a testament to the enduring power of communication, even in the most anachronistic of settings. And the goose feathers? They remained scattered throughout the village, silent witnesses to a tale of unexpected unity and shared laughter, a legacy that would undoubtedly be passed down through countless generations. The tale of the great texting tournament would endure, a timeless reminder of how the most improbable events can bring people together, reminding them of the absurdity and wonder of life, one text message at a time. The story would continue to resonate, a testament to the enduring power of shared experience and the transforming effects of laughter in a world where tradition and technology often found themselves in the most hilarious of collisions. The age of medieval texting had truly begun, and the villagers, having navigated its initial chaos, were now ready to embrace its enduring charm and surprising power to connect.